Cheers.
All right, guys, we are back. We are live. Everything's working. I see us. We're going. Welcome back to another great week of In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio. We're really excited today. We have a great show lined up for you guys. We have Joe Souza from I Think I've Created a Monster as our guest today. He's going to be working in the studio, showing us how he makes some of his wonderful art pieces. If you guys haven't seen these things yet, oh man, stick around. One of the great things also, we're doing our holidays giveaways, guys. So Joe's gonna be giving away a couple of unique items he'll share with us a little bit later in the show. We have a whole list of holidays giveaways, discounts, things you can order, purchase, and use our codes for. We have grow tents, we have books, we have our jars, we have CBD oils, we have licenses, medical cards. We have all sorts of things coming for you guys. If you guys want to find out more, please go find us on our In the Weeds Facebook page and our Instagram page where you can find out more information. It's just really easy. All you got to do is tag a couple friends and you get entered to win. We'll be doing our drawings here on December 18th, about a week before Christmas. It'll be Friday night at 4:20. We're going to let it all out and we're going to enjoy this Corona 2020 Christmas that we're going through our holiday season, right? I want to welcome Timothy Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions, who's joining us again today, who does our leaf law segment. We'll be talking to Timothy a little bit later about all the news that happened this week, and there's a lot of it to discuss, some of the crazy things that we've seen, and what to expect coming up this holiday, and what we should be careful for, guys, because remember, just because it's legal in your state doesn't mean it's legal. So know your laws. Don't get yourself in trouble this holiday season, because they still arrest people. I still see articles on it all the time. We're going to have Thomas Markholm of Vermont Grow Coaching on as well. He's a little bit behind. He's got a crazy day going on, so hopefully he'll be able to join us as well. And he'll be bringing us his Growers Guide segment. And new to the show, which is great, we played a quick segment last week and we introduced you guys. But this for me is very exciting. We have Sherry Tuckis of the Green Nurse Group, who will be joining us, as well as Nurse Mark, who won't be here today, but Sherry and Mark will be providing content for us for their little segment every week on Into the Weeds, which will be great. I'm really excited about this partnership, and hopefully everybody tuning in will enjoy this because as we all know, we try to bring in the best of the best, right? To give us their insights and their expertise on cannabis. So if you guys want to find out more, you can visit the Green Nurse. They're literally everywhere. And welcome, Sherry, for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. This is truly a pleasure to be here. Any opportunity that we can get to educate and empower people to use this plant safely and effectively to decrease stigma, I'm all about. All about that.
We had to educate and inspire. I mean, for us, the biggest thing is inspiration. The biggest question we get, and I think everybody agrees with us here, is that how do we get involved in this industry? I'm sure even from Joe's standpoint, where he's making craft pieces with art, right? Not many people probably ever think that this would work in the cannabis industry, right? Which leads us to bringing on Joe, right? So Joe, with that being said, introduce everybody to who you are, where you're from, and how you got into this industry. I mean, this is a unique industry, and what you're doing is a unique part of it.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here again. It's been a little while. I think I was on maybe a year ago or so when things were actually able to see each other and get together and stuff like that. But my name's Joe. I think I created a Monstah studio. Me and my girlfriend Wendy are pretty much the only people that work together with it. Everything that I make is 100% handmade. I don't use any molds, so every piece is completely unique. I started doing paper mache actually when I was really young because it was accessible, it was cheap, anybody could get to it whenever I wanted it. I could just make a huge mess and do what I wanted to do. I stuck with it. I kind of evolved into cloth mache, which is what I'm doing now. So these jars are actually made from a combination of polymer clays and cloth and glue. The cloth is probably the strongest thing on the jar. The polymer clay would break way before the cloth did. The cloth, once it's cured, is incredibly strong. Water resistant, not waterproof. You can't like submerge it in water, but you can wipe them down and get them wet, things along those lines. I originally started making larger sculptures just because it was such a medium that you didn't need a lot of money to do, so I could make big pieces. And one day someone asked to buy one, and I was just kind of blown away. Like, you actually want to buy this? So a couple of the bigger ones sold, and I started doing shows, and This was probably pre-2000, probably like 98 or so. And I'm sitting in like a craft show, like a church, between a woman like selling pot holders and then another woman doing like, stained sea glass type stuff. And here I am with my monsters in the middle of the show. So it was, I stood out, to say none the least, until I actually found my market of where I wanted to be. I ended up scaling them down through the years because people said they were too big, but it wasn't until about 2 or 3 years ago when I started thinking utilitarian with them, because the biggest thing I always got was, what do they do? What are they for? And I know how to tell someone it's a sculpture. It's doing what it does. This is what it's for. You just look at it, So when I saw the jars around the house from pretty much curing my own stuff and, having my own grow going, it was like, I wonder if I slapped a face on one of these jars, if, it would go over well. And talking about stigma, it's funny because when I first started, I didn't want to market it in the marijuana world. I wanted to kind of, go more towards the Comic-Cons, the fantasy, the sci-fi stuff like that. As much as I myself, am a smoker, always have been a user of medical, someone who would advocate for it and try to take the stigma away from it. I didn't want to label myself that because of the stigma. I kind of thought that maybe I wouldn't be taken this seriously. And this was still in, it was, the gray market was starting to come out. It was still not as accepted as it is now. And so it just went that way. People, I would go to like Massachusetts and people would pick up a jar and be like, oh my God, look at this jar. They'd yell across the show, I'm going to put my weed in this jar. It's awesome. Then I traveled down to like Jersey where it was still illegal. And they'd be like, I'm going to put my weed in this jar. No matter where I went or what show I did, people were putting weed in the jars. I think it was the Harvest Cup where they finally gave me, a shot to come and test out the market where it wouldn't be breaking the bank, because I was really nervous about doing it. And I was just blown away at, like, I couldn't keep up with it. I literally pretty much sold everything I bought, and it's been a crazy roller coaster ever since. I really can't keep up, and I'm super grateful. And I'm, a good friend of mine told me when I was talking to her about it, like, I don't know what to do. This isn't really what I intended to do with this at first. She said, art's organic and it's going to go where it wants to go. And if you fight it, it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. So I'm just kind of going where it takes me. And I'm really glad to be back, because I've always loved this community, but it was just kind of the stigma, like we're talking about. I thought that if I labeled myself a marijuana artist, I would always be a marijuana artist. I wouldn't be taken seriously. And that was all I'd ever be able to do, but I really trying to get over that. It doesn't bother me now because I'm really happy with how well I've been accepted into this community and how supportive everyone is with it.
Well, it really found a place in our community, like you said. I mean, a jar. We love jars, right? And it's a great marketing tool too. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, the way I found you was literally walking around an event and watching someone holding one of the pieces and showing it to a group of people going, what is this? It almost markets itself to the point where I had to go find it, right?
The Harvest Cup, I was up in like, the little section in the alley. So it was, I was surprised. Actually, when we were setting up with the other people up there, we were like, man, no one's going to come up here. Who's going to come up here? I've done many shows in the DCU before that show. And I didn't even know that area existed. So I was like, oh man, this isn't good. But it was a phenomenal show. And it was just like you said, people were coming up saying, hey, I saw someone on the floor with this jar, and I asked them where it was. And, there's a bunch of other great artists coming up there. So once everybody's art started getting down on the floor, everybody was asking, about everybody's art. And started bringing people up. And it was such a great ebb and flow. We'd have a huge crowd come up. Then we'd kind of slow down a little. We'd gather ourselves, and another huge crowd would come up. It really was a changing show for my career path, without a doubt. And Jen and Jeremy are so helpful, and they do a great job with the show.
I mean, like, but what you created was a niche, though. Like, there's nobody really doing anything near it, right? Everybody wants to have something like me. And I had my jar. I bought a jar years ago. I took it everywhere. It was the best conversation piece ever. The minute usually it's, hey, look at my bud and look at this great flower. People are like, what the hell? Where'd you get this thing? What is it? How's it last? And like you're saying, so. I mean, as far as the jars go, to build these things, right? I mean, I look at them and I go, man, I'm going to break this thing. Like, how durable are these things?
Well, like I was saying, the cloth is super strong. The polymer clay is really the weakest thing on it. So like the teeth that stick out and things like that, I really try to, armatures and things that stick out like arms have been sculptors' enemies since day one. I mean, the Venus de Milo had arms at one point. They just broke off. It's just what happens after years and years of use. So as a sculptor, you don't see too many sculptures with the arms like coming straight up, because that's going to break off. They're always connected to a second point or things like that. So I try to take that into consideration, because I'm not just creating art, I'm creating utilitarian art. So it kind of has to hold up to a point. You know, I like to think that some of my lower end jars, like this little guy that we're going to do for the giveaway here,
Oh, he's so cute.
The $40 range or so. You know, this could go around with people, throw it in the car a couple, 3 or 4 years. Yeah, the paint's going to chip off. I mean, it's, you know, it's a handmade piece. It's really not meant to be, but they're pretty durable. There's a 2 coats at least of polyurethane on here. I use a water-based polyurethane just because it's safer, and I don't like the chemicals from the, you know, the other stuff. They stay really strong. Inside of the jar is completely clean. I paint the outside of the jar first before it goes on, so you don't have anything on the inside, which was definitely an afterthought. My first batch was like, oh, the Titanic sunk. You know, I was looking at it in the newspaper.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you do custom creations?
I do custom creations, but right now I'm kind of like, I take way too long to do them. You know, it takes a long process to begin with, and I just I work on so many things, and if I just don't feel like working on something, I just don't. So,
what if someone gave you a custom project in like 8 months to complete? Would you be able to?
That's about my timeline.
Very cool. I might have a project for you. Those jars are really, really cool.
Thanks.
My birthday's in July, so I'm thinking I'm gonna.
They don't have to necessarily be monsters either, right? I mean, you can literally do whatever you want. But what inspired you to do? So, I mean, there's a familiarity to a lot of your pieces, right? But like, what inspires you? Where does the inspiration come to build the jar, the crazy teeth, and all these unique attributes to it that really make it that one way? I mean, are you building a lot of them at the same time, or are you just kind of doing one at a time?
I was raised on fantasy. You know, very, very young. My father provided lots of books and really pushed books on me. So I was always reading, like, you know, I was read The Hobbit by the time I could read, Lord of the Rings, the John Carter series, stuff like that. And there was always comic books in my house. At least 30 to 40 comic books a month my father would go through. And he was an artist himself, so I always had art supplies. And I just loved horror movies. So I really wanted to make monsters, as in scary monsters, but they always just kept coming out whimsical. You know, they just kept coming out like they come out. And at one point, I finally just gave up and embraced it. And said, this is how my stuff comes out. It's colorful. It's a monster. I like to say I make monsters that make people smile. That you're not really going to be afraid of my monsters. You know what I mean? They're more of a happy type of thing. For me to do type things, it just doesn't work out.
Well, I mean, and now you're doing other things just besides jars, though, right? It's not only just jars. You have containers. I saw that you're working with Patholic Pipes there to do some of their kits with his pipes, which is really neat. His handmade stone pipes. I've seen a lot of unique things, even just hangers, right?
Yep. And well, so originally when I started doing the shows, the jars wasn't my main product. That was kind of like, you know, the Comic Cons, like the boxes you were talking about and things like that would sell more than the jars. You know, but the people that bought the jars, 90% of them bought them for one reason, and they made it pretty vocal on what this jar was, what was going to be put in this jar. So, and it's like they'd come up and they'd ask what you put in, and I'd be like, candy, jelly beans. Like, no, you put weed in that, don't you? Yeah. You know.
This is how I look at it. It's the jar. It's the jar to keep me out of being a monster. We keep them
exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's unique when we talk about, from a cannabis standpoint, the curing process, right? Like a lot of people kind of don't really realize what the jarring process can do.
Yeah.
For the cure, right?
You know, letting those gases out and letting fresh oxygen in every day for the plants to finish their thing. Because I mean, after you cut them, they're still alive. You know, there's still some chlorophyll in there that's going to fuel that curing process. And you got to change out that air every day, then every 2 days. Then, you know, you get it down to about a week or so of burping, and then you can actually seal that thing up and let it cure. So jars mason jars are a big part of a grower's, you know, thing. And if it wasn't for me having an unlimited supply of mason jars from 20 years of growing, then this might never happened.
Right, they do that pretty quick. No, so Joe, I mean, it's a really unique art that you have here, right? How can people go and find what you're making? Like, so, I mean, obviously we're talking about a lot of stuff. So the listeners that are tuning in right now who don't know and never seen what we're talking about here, where's the best place they can go find some of your pieces?
Instagram's probably the best bet. My Instagram handle is Souza III, the number 3. Or you can even just search, I think I've created a Monstah, and you'll find me. That's Monstah, Monstah, because we're in New England and we don't use any R's. So I didn't have to explain that everywhere I went. Pretty much people got on that right away with my accent. They knew right away what I was talking about.
They get it. They get it, right? No, they're great. I mean, take us through. I mean, obviously you're in your studio now. What is the process to make one of these? You're saying it does take. There's a lot of time involved, right?
All right, so I did a couple of different steps here. So we got a different couple jars. So first we paint the jar, like I said, it's just a couple layers of spray paint. And then I cover the jar with a paper mache of the same color of the paint. And that gives it a really deep look inside where you're not going to see anything else coming through. This one actually has, I don't know if you can see it once it focuses in, but it has the darker red area is an area that's cut out with masking tape. So when it's done, that'll come off so you can see into the jar. So the mouth will go around there. So that has to be planned ahead of time if I know I'm going to do this jar. So then, like you were saying, sometimes, I'll just sit upstairs and just make eyeballs, tons and tons of little eyeballs that get baked in the oven. And then I'll come downstairs and grab a bunch of jars and a bunch of eyeballs. And most of the time I don't have anything planned on what I'm going to do. It's just what kind of works with what, I know that I had to leave a lot of space here because I want bigger eyes. So, I'll start adding the eyes to the guys. And I use an industrial hot glue. Zach, this glue gun gets more attention than my monsters most of the time. It's got a cordless glue gun. Which heats up really
that technology right there.
Yeah, it gets it up, which is great for the shows because some of the eyes that I do are glass pieces that you can actually pick out at the show, and I'll glue it right in, and that'll finish up your monster for you.
That's awesome.
So I'll make eyes, I'll make teeth, I'll make horns, then we just start gluing the pieces onto the guys, and see, I'll actually heat up the glue gun, and we'll glue one on at one point, and then once
there's lots of different ways to customize these and really individualize them, right?
Yeah, it's almost like a McDonald's restaurant type thing. Like add some horns, you want to supersize and add some teeth to it. You want to add this and that, and so it's pretty much like a Mr. Potato heading together what I think looks well and what looks good. But it usually always starts with the eyes because that kind of gives me the center of where it's going to build from. Where I'm going to place the mouth and then the horns and then tentacles if there's going to be tentacles or anything else that I can think of adding to these guys.
You're right. I think the more awkward it looks, the better in this kind of a situation, right?
Definitely. When I can, it's usually later at night when I can come up with the really off-key ones, and those are always the first ones to sell. The ones with the eyes stacked awkwardly, or something that's just not the to the norm of it. But it's hard to predict. I'll make a bunch of small jars for a show, and all the big jars will sell. And I'll make a bunch of big jars, and you don't want to buy them. Actually, they'll all buy magnets. Yeah.
It's usually how it works, right? In everything we do, right?
Yeah.
Be prepared for one thing and get nailed on the other. It's great. I love seeing them. I love seeing how people respond to them. Like you said, it's like everybody's happy with it. It's like a beaded necklace. It's
that's one of my favorite things to be in an event where I've maybe donated something for a raffle and someone wins that raffle and I can watch them and they don't even know I'm the artist that made it, and I can see their honest reaction to it of how they feel about it, how they're showing their friends, and you know what I mean. It's definitely cool, to have someone take appreciation of your work like that. So after we glue on the eyes and the tentacles, we end up with something along this, and these are the pieces of cloth, the first strips that come on, that are usually it's the eyebrow, and I can kind of just pull down the middle to give them a scowl if I want, or pull one side up. The best thing that I really fell in love with the cloth mache is just the natural contours and the curves. And it just works with however I want it. If I want to pull it down, all the rest of the curves follow. I don't have to go in and sculpt every individual one. I wish I could claim it all, but it just kind of works with it. It's a natural flow, and it has that organic flow that just makes them look. The biggest part is once this cloth is on, is actually smoothing it down and getting it to blend into the rest of the jar. That's the majority of the work. There's so much sanding and pasting involved in these to make it kind of look as like it's not added on. It's just one piece.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, how workable is this material though? Because I mean, it looks like you get some really good edges. Is it stuff that will hold itself there and dry quickly, or is it something that you're kind of playing with and holding and hoping it dries? Do you have a hair blower?
Yeah, I don't. Sometimes just a fan if I'm in a rush and I want to have an edge that's a little more severe. But what I do is I let the glue that I'm going to work with sit out for a couple of days, and it kind of evaporates. I've tried all these different chemicals that they sell you to stiffen the glue, these professional fabric stiffeners. Just plain old Elmer's white glue works best. And then I just fill that up, let it sit out and evaporate so it actually gets thicker. and it just soaks up inside the cloth that I use, and I can kind of mold it, and I put it where I kind of want it to be and let it dry for maybe 6 or 7 hours, and then come back and I can kind of mess around with it and get a better shape. And then the next morning I can kind of fine tune it in. I honestly handle these things at least 40 to 50 times before they're done. But a lot of times it's just not even a minute. I just grab it, throw a piece of cloth on, put it aside, and go to the next one. So I'm literally, if you could actually come around and see all the stuff, I'm working on hundreds of pieces at a time.
And I've seen some of your setups. I've seen you work on your eyes, and you've got everything in front of you. And I'm just like, it's amazing. And when it all comes together to the end piece, it's really unique. Like you said, and you're working on a couple new things right now, right? You have a couple different new items you're about to release.
Well, I started working with a new material, which is a 2-part epoxy clay, which is pretty much the strongest material I've ever come across. It's an epoxy sculpt. You mix 2 pieces together, you get about a couple hours to work with it. And in 24 hours, the stuff dries up solid. So it's going to allow me to do. I originally started doing it because I had a lot of people start asking me to wrap pipes and do things like that. And I didn't think that paper mache and cloth mache would be the best material to actually wrap a bong with. Something I did long ago, when I was still in high school, I did it with the polymer clays and stuff like that. But they're not the strongest material. This stuff, I don't know if you can see them. This is a little mini dabber. So I'm going to start out with this guy. This stuff is, that's like if I did that to one of my other horns, it would chip into tons of pieces. You can't break this stuff. And so once the tape comes off, we'll have the little dabber and the little guy. So this will get used to the material itself. And I'll move on to maybe some smaller pipes. And then hopefully we'll see some big crazy bongs in the future soon.
Now, is this material that can heat up? Is it okay to get hot?
Well, it'll be something that's wrapped around the glass piece. The bowl itself will be completely separate and away from it. Nice. You know what I mean? There's lots of people that have done it. There's a couple good guys that you can check out. Moldy Creations on Instagram. He does some really, really crazy work with polymer clays. The one thing that I did with the paper mache is that's not a lot of people do it, and that's why I stuck with it. Is because the cloth mache is such a unique work. You can't do that with resin. You can't do it with clay. You'll never get the deep folded details. With the mold, like that would just ruin your mold trying to pull it out. So it was really unique work that I really wanted to. It's a labor of love. It's a lot of work, a lot of hours to do it, but it's worth it in the end because, like I said, and like you said, it's a unique look. I feel not a lot of people do it, and I get a lot like I've never seen anything like it. And a lot of people can't guess what it is. Mostly adult kids know right away. Kids are like, "Oh, that's paper mache. I just did that last week in school." Adults think it's leather or wood or
Right. Well, I think we've all played at one point in our life. I hope, man. I mean, I remember doing little sculptures when I was a kid, which even makes it more fun. I think that's what the part of the value add to it, because it's just it brings you back to a fun point in life, right?
Yeah.
So if I were to bring you a big 3-foot glass bong, right, you could literally make a monster out of it.
We'll see. That's the plan. Starting small, this material is a little different. It has some things that are better, some things that are worse with what I'm used to working with, but it's not uncommon for artists to, have to adapt to using different things. And I'm sure when the time comes, I'll be able to do something cool, but start small for now. And a lot of people have asked me for the dabbers or something, and I didn't want to do anything that would be around marijuana, or the flames or the torches that like paper mache or cloth mache. So it's just kind of waiting to take that step to find a new material that I wanted to do it out of. So it's a little bit different than what I'm used to doing.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting. I'd like to see it on glass pieces. I've seen some of the pipes that you've been talking about where they take a glass pipe and put a person or an animal or something around it and make it look really cool and unique. I always like it when they're like those, when they can sit on the shelf and people look at them, they go, "Oh, well, this is really cool and unique," and they think it's something completely different. Like you said, they pick it up and they realize it has a hole and a bowl in it. You know what I mean? Or unique things like that, whether it's glass or paper mache, stuff like this. I had my jar sitting on my shelf. It was a showpiece, so I got it was a great conversation piece. People laugh at it. Like you said, it brings you back to a kid. My kid looks at it and goes, "What the heck is this, Dad?" And yeah, don't touch it. So it's a lot of cool, fun stuff. No, man. Well, I appreciate what you do in this industry, because again, like we were talking before, and before we cut to another segment here real quick. You're a medical patient too, so like obviously you talked about how important stigmas are for you. You've really thought about your approach to this and what it looked like for you. But being a patient now, let's talk about that. You're in Rhode Island, correct?
Yep, I was a caregiver first before a patient because they were a lot more strict at the time. We're going back to 2005, I'm going to say. I was one of the first 300 people in Rhode Island in the system. I was very active with RIPAC, which was Rhode Island's Patients Advocacy Coalition. My friend Jesse did a great job on setting it up, and him and Senator Slater, they pretty much pushed this whole legislation through that got us started with this. I think Rhode Island did one of the best jobs on setting up how they, did their medical program, and a lot of other states actually. We modeled it after Canada. They went up there and they toured a lot of the Canadian medical dispensaries and talked to the people up there, and that's how Senator Slater modeled the law to pass it in Rhode Island. So when I first got into it, I mean, you try to keep it quiet. They tell you, even though it's legal, you act like it's still illegal, keep it quiet, don't talk about it, which is something that's really not hard for me to do anyway, so I had my grow going, and when sooner or later it got out within the family, and it was like, you have kids and this and that. I mean, I even had a separate building that I grew in. I rented a completely separate apartment. One part would be my studio for the artwork, and 2 bedrooms would be my grow rooms, and I took care of 5 patients and myself, and I'd still get so much slack from it. And I would tell people, like, you have 6 chemicals under your kitchen sink right now that your kid would drink and would probably kill him. You could easily get to it. My kid would have to find my apartment, go into the room, pick the plants. What's he going to do? Eat it? Is he going to dry it? Is he going to cure it and smoke it? Even if he ate it, he'd just go to sleep, which he wouldn't do. Like, how ridiculous you sound right now? Mm-hmm. And then it goes to, well, it's not safe, or it's not federally illegal. And the stigma is just aggravating, and just the two-sidedness of it, and just common sense, and these are people that drink a lot, and telling me that it's something I shouldn't be doing. But I felt good. I saw one of my friends that went from 200 pounds from cancer to lymph nodes go to 120, and then go back up to 200 after going through his treatment and stuff. It feels good to help people like that, and it's an amazing plant. That's tons of things about that plant that aren't the same in any other plants, and we're meant to find it. We're meant to use it as a higher heat pattern, a higher smell pattern. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just something I've been passionate about for my whole life, and I really think that people. Glad to see people finally catching on board and letting it, find out what we can do. I mean, look, the past 3 years, how many the eco-cannabinoid system in us? That's huge. Finally discovering something like that is humongous. How far behind if we would have just took it seriously 20 years ago? Where would we be now? We would be crazy.
Right. Imagine if we didn't have that stigma, and imagine if the nurses could do what they need to do, and we had the research that supported it.
Allocated the money that we need to for the research. That's what it is.
Well, it blows me away that we can come up with a vaccine in a couple months that we're going to release on millions of people and do all that, but we still can't figure out cannabis, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. And it looks like the first trial didn't go so very hot right now. So in the news today, if anybody's been reading, or if you're alive, you've seen that they've had some issues with the first trial vaccinations that were handed out. So everyone's.
I didn't see that. I didn't see that. Wow.
Yeah, they had some Bell's palsy reactions to the first 4 people that have taken the shot. So I mean, this is where science scares me a little bit, because I mean, we talk about all the time on the show. Sherry, I'm sure you can attribute to this too. I mean, we use this as it was a pharmaceutical for many years prior to the 1930s. I mean, it dates way back, right?
Oh,
it's all been
way
used,
back.
Yeah, we've used it in a medical sense for years, and it's like, for us to sit here and say that we need more. I mean, I understand research as far as today's technologies go, but I mean, do we really need to know that it doesn't kill people? It helps with seizures. Like our death rates with cannabis are less than peanuts, right? We have more deaths with ants every year. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of these things really, really blow me away. I read a fun article the other day that was talking about how many people die from tipping over of soda machines. So technically, we have more soda machine deaths than we do cannabis deaths in our world. And how long has soda machines been around? So it's like, when we look at all these great, especially with COVID right now, because we are talking about research and fast tracking things and vaccinations and stuff like that, where there's been a huge amount of our industry has been talking about the effects. And Sherry, you guys just did a show on this, right, with cannabis and COVID-19. Which there's a lot of people out there that really talk about the benefits of cannabis, even with COVID-19. A lot of people don't realize, we think about smoking cannabis and the effect it has on our lungs, right? But when we talk to athletes and we see people who consume cannabis on a normal basis that have a healthy lifestyle, they're one of the fittest people in the world, right?
Yeah,
Sure, Sherry could talk a little bit.
absolutely. Cannabinoids are adaptogens. Our body knows how to use this plant because we make components in our body just like the plant. It's one of my biggest teaching points is that, the plant makes THC. We make a molecule called denandamine, and the molecular structure is the same. It is the key that unlocks the door to the largest neurotransmitter signaling system in our body. Cannabinoids are adaptogens that allow our body to adopt to stress. So it's like an on-off switch, right? So something happens in your body, endocannabinoid system turns the switch on and releases these internal endogenous cannabinoids to go to specific neurotransmitter signaling systems to tell your body to either do something or stop doing something. So if you're not making enough of your own internal endogenous cannabinoids, what happens? The messages don't get where they need to go. Our body gets confused, and that's when we start to have a dysregulation. Our endocannabinoid system becomes not as nourished, and messages don't get where they need to go, and our body gets confused, and our body's always trying to go back to homeostasis. So when I'm actually working even with providers around stigma, one of the biggest things I tell them is this: when I look at my own case as a medical cannabis patient, if you all knew about the endocannabinoid system, I wouldn't have suffered as long as I suffered with the chronic debilitating illness. Because every single thing, as clinicians, as nurses, doctors, healthcare professionals, every single thing that we tell our patients to do or not do affects the endocannabinoid system. So we as health professionals have a moral, legal, ethical obligation to know this, to study this, to teach this. It can be applied to anything. And that's the part that's so fascinating. And with the part that I love too, when it comes to cannabis, is even the nursing industry is taking this, is truly starting to understand this. The National Council State Boards of Nursing in 2018, the National Council State Boards of Nursing is the board of nursing that actually provides the exams that nurses must take in every single state in order to be licensed. So they did a call to action in 2018 that all nurses need to have 6 essential areas of clinical knowledge, 6 essential areas. And I think the most important one of all is the 6th. The 6th one is this: the nurse shall not approach the patient with judgment in regards to their preferred method of treatment. That's huge. That's that's critical. So what did we come into the medical profession for? We came in because we care about human beings. And so part of that is evolving with the science. The science is there, and providers say, oh, there's not enough research. I go, you haven't looked hard enough, because there's plenty of research. And just because you can't find it doesn't mean that it's not there. So yeah,
No.
As you can tell, I'm really, really passionate about this plant and what it's done for people. And so happy that nurses are really coming on board and it's evolving. And, we just had, Timothy was just with us at the American Cannabis Nurses Association. We had a 3-day conference. American Cannabis Nurses Association is a nonprofit about education, advocacy, excellence, and teaching nurses how to get the appropriate education that they need, through all different types of, it's a nonprofit. And so it's really, really amazing program. And then the Cannabis Nurses Network is another network of nurses, that is out there also doing amazing things, helping to evolve nurses. So there's just so many different things that are out there for nurses to truly understand this and to get the information that they need, and they can incorporate it into anything that they're doing. Anything that you're doing as a nurse or a clinician, you can incorporate cannabinoid education into your practice.
And you need to. I mean, I think we've talked to a lot of nurses on the show, even Jessalyn Dolan included, about the state of, healthcare around cannabis. You know what I mean? Like, Joe is saying the endocannabinoid system, it's fairly new to us, right? Like, we're just realizing this. Like you're saying, there's a call to action now to look into this more, because I think a lot of these doctors are still looking at it from a stigma. And when we talked to Jessalyn, and, a couple of our nurses, we've had Dr. Bob on, we've had Dr. Uma on, and one of our biggest things is the stigmas. I mean, for you, Sherry, I mean, obviously, you've taken a heavy stance on the cannabis side of things. So you seen any really kickbacks or instances of stigmas towards you about being a cannabis nurse? I mean, do you feel like the industry is like
They're
I guess my
starting to
question is, do you
embrace
feel
it.
the industry is open to this right now, or are we still like kind of like no until we get this testing? You know what I mean?
It's getting there. I'm going to tell you why and how I came out of the cannabis closet. So I was truly plagued with stigma. My mother blocked me on Facebook. I love you, Mom. And she wrote me out of her will. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. Strict Irish Catholic, completely petrified. How I paid for Boston College and you're a drug dealer. So I had to work through this. But the cannabis was saving my life. I was sick, suffering, and debilitated. And so truly what happened was I started to, and my story is a little bit unique than other nurses because I was so plagued with stigma. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know who to talk to. I had no one to learn from. So I joined every single recreational cannabis group there was on Facebook. And I started to go to all of their events and their sessions. And I learned things that I would never learn in a book, never learn in a webinar, never learn in an expo or a class. I had that true hands-on experiential learning with caregivers, with healers that people called dealers. And so I truly, the healing community truly impacted how I started to use this plant, made it okay for me to use it. And then from there, I started to marry what I learned in the community to the science. And basically with the stigma around it, I came out of the cannabis closet when I was asked to teach a college course at Boston College. So I graduated from Boston College in 1988. In 2018, they asked me and two of my other cannabis nursing colleagues to present to the graduating nurse practitioner class at Boston College. So I was like, wow, I went from smoking a J behind the bushes at BC to standing, in the nursing hall at Boston College in front of a class of 30 advanced nurse practitioners that were graduating. So I looked at that and said, you know what, it's time. And so what really helped me to move through the stigma was this: I'm either all in or I'm all out. So I either need to be authentic, raw, real, transparent, and share my story, or I'm going to continue to hide. And what is in the best and highest interest? So me working with this plant has opened up my eyes to another way of working with patients. So when you can find the purpose and your passion and suffering, I truly see that I experienced what I experienced so I could reinvent myself and truly bring knowledge through this plant, through the biopsychosocial spiritual aspects of healing using plant medicine and other progressive plants and tools to help people reach a new level of wellness. Truly, as we know now, there is a big disconnect between health and care. The future of healthcare is patient empowerment, teaching patients choices, giving them options, being able to explain to them, this is good for your endocannabinoid system and this isn't, and allowing them to make choices that are appropriate for them. And so that's what we do as green nurses, is we educate and empower, provide choices. We teach the patients how to fish, like how to figure it out, how to ask critical questions. And
yeah. I know you don't have much time with us today, which I'm exceptionally grateful for you being on with us. There's one question I have to ask you, because this is something that drives me nuts, and I say this to everybody, and I get a lot of funny looks. The recreation industry and the medical industry are too crossed over right now. There's patients taking things that are not medically adept for a patient, like booth carts. You know what I mean? Like the carts, I'm not a big fan of, because when we talk about cannabinoids, by the time they get a cart in their hand, there's not many cannabinoids in there. It's THC focused. And what are you doing? It's kind of like, I tell people all the time, it's like drinking a beer for your broken arm, right? It helps take away that pain for a minute. It's like most drugs, right? But is it doing anything to help your arm? You know what I mean? That's my question. So like when you're a medical patient and you're buying these shatters and these carts and these things that are like basically overly processed, THC driven products that are great for the recreation industry. I'm not going to knock them, because I'll tell you right now, I love taking dabs, right? But if I'm a patient, I'd rather be taking a fresh press dab than something that's been dried, cured, no cannabinoids, processed, been through a lab. And sadly, when I go into dispensaries, these are the things I see, right? Like, so is there a disconnect there? Do we need to focus on more of a separation, or do you think it's good to where it is from a nurse standpoint?
From a nursing standpoint, when I'm working with cannabis and with patients, one of the first things I say to them is this isn't about me, this is about you. What's important to you and how do you want to live your life? So that's where we start, right? Because I can tell, I can look at their intake form, I can look at all this stuff, and I can say, you need this, 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 and this, and you shouldn't have this, this, and that, but it's not about me, it's about them. And so really bringing them to the place of understanding how the endocannabinoid system works and the different products they're going to choose and how that's going to affect them. So I always tell patients, because a lot of the questions are, I don't want to get high, or I am high a lot, how do I figure it out? And I said, well, there's 3 ways to use cannabis: medically, recreationally, and irresponsibly. And it all has to do with your consciousness when you go to consume. And so that's really, really important. And no shame in recreational use, but there's a fine line. You know, there's a fine line, you know, truly, it's about teaching people about their body and how it works. And everything that you do or don't do, that's why we ask all those questions about lifestyle, is going to affect how cannabinoids work in your body for whatever reason that you're using them. And of course, there are better choices, so much better choices. Like, I truly prefer the fresh rosin to dab over the shatter. You know, and even as a medical patient, there are certain medical patients, I'm not going to lie, sometimes I dab. I've dabbed for recreational purposes, I've dabbed for concentration purposes, and I've dabbed for medical purposes. And there is a true distinction based on what I'm choosing and what I'm doing it for, and if I'm combining it with CBD. So that's the part that's so cool about this plant and having an understanding of the endocannabinoid system, is we have the ability to craft or teach patients how to craft how they want to experience the plant.
Yep, and I think one of the things we need to really make sure that people who are patients understand, especially when they're coming to cannabis, right? Because I've also heard of the horror story side where, hey, I bought a bottle off Amazon, I spent $120, it didn't work, and then it's like, you know, first time to make a first impression kind of thing. I'm never going to try this again. It didn't work for me. Yes. I spent way too much money, blah, 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 blah. And again, this is what we're talking about education, right? This is the great thing that you talk about. And the one thing I want to make sure everybody understands is, you know, it seems like it's okay in the medical industry to understand that pharmaceutical drugs will treat everybody a little different, right? We seem to have that understanding, but we don't seem to give that to cannabis, where there's how many different strains, and each strain has its own benefit and its own value, especially when it comes to the medical side of things, right? Not only does it have its terps and tastes and highs and THC levels that us recreation guys love, but it has major medical benefits, right? Right down to, you know, each plant has different cannabinoids. Even the terpenes have a lot to do with, you know, the effects and the way you feel and the benefits for you. And it's not only just in cannabis either, it's diets, it's food, right? You can find these cannabinoids in gingers and rosemaries and things that you can really bring back into cooking at home. I think me and Joe were talking about this before everybody got on. It's been an interesting life for us, because it's like, I kind of grew up in the era where, you know, it was home cooked meals, right? And then it went to the microwave dinners, right? And then it went to the processed dinners. Now everything became processed, and now we're starting to see, as I'm sure you can attest to, Sherry, a slew of health issues after that. You know what I mean? Now, whether they're gluten intolerances and all these things are connected, and autisms and these things like that are connected to processed foods or vaccinations or shots or whatever we're doing, right? The biggest thing
affects their endocannabinoid system. Food truly affects their endocannabinoid system. Fast food, fried food, fake food, artificial flavors, artificial colorings, trans fat, hydrogenated oils, sugar, and high fructose corn syrup.
Yes, no good. I mean, I've removed a lot of that from my diet in the last few years. I'll admit, I used to be on the road all the time, McDonald's, quick, easy, whatever I could get for the cheapest and the best tasting, just to keep going, right? Where, you know, just the simplest things that you do for your diet can make a huge effect on your life. Don't eat at midnight. You know what I mean? Like you said, watch out for your intakes, because there's other options. There's plenty of options to eat healthy, right?
Totally.
I mean, you just have to spend an extra 2 minutes to read a box, right? Well, this brings us to a great segue, because you get a chance to sit down and talk with a nun recently, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this little segment we got coming up here.
Okay, so this is a really cool segment. So Sister Suzanne, she's given me permission to share her story. She's a nun that I started working with 3 years ago. She came to me with chronic regional pain syndrome, which is a really bad chronic myofascial pain disorder that affects various areas of her body. She was on over 200 micrograms of fentanyl in a patch. Other narcotics, benzodiazepines, other pharmaceuticals. She had an internal neurotransmitter stimulator to monitor pain. She was a nun, she was incapacitated, she was debilitated, and literally in bed for 20 out of 24 hours a day. So she came to us. Cannabis bridged the gap from what she wasn't getting from traditional medicine. And over the course of almost 2 years, about an year and a half, she was able to get off of all of her fentanyl and her narcotics, and she's back to the church. So it's really, really a great segment. And the part that's really cool too about Suzanne's story, it was Suzanne's story that my mom saw decrease the stigma for her. And my mom now is on cannabis. And that's another show that I'm going to let you guys watch, because she came out of the closet after she started to have the amazing experience of using the plant. So Sister Suzanne talks about cannabis or spirituality as the root of cannabis care, truly, because what does it do? It brings hope, inspiration for growth and healing. And that's what we're trying to do, is change what the term high means. Hope, inspiration, growth, and healing to live your best life. So she's really cool. I hope you guys enjoy the clip.
All right. Well, let's go check out the clip. This is Sister Suzanne, a real nun, correct? Right? This isn't a gimmick.
Real nun.
This isn't
No,
like
this is a
the
real
nuns.
nun.
This is a real nun with experiences.
Yep.
These are the inspirations right here. Like, and I'm glad you said, because I was going to make a point that, you know, where you said your mom, this was the inspiration for your mom. Everybody has a certain inspiration. Like we're all really against something until it happens closely to us, or to somebody that we don't think it'll ever happen to, right? Especially like this, like you said, you're a user, you're your mom's daughter, you're trying to explain to her teacher, she doesn't want to hear it. But the nun story, it clicks with her, right? So now, and then it opens her minds to try it. It's just about being open-minded. I think one thing in this world that we're all lacking on many different levels is open-mindedness, whether it comes to communications with relationships, our own bodies, our health, stigmas, the way we look at things.
And changing language, you know, the language that's surrounding how we talk about this plant and how it works is really, really huge. You know, because the big thing that I get always from people that are scared is, I don't want to be high. And my question to them is this: have you ever experienced what it means to be high? And the answer is no. And I said, so what you're doing is you're judging a feeling before you've experienced it. The other thing that I tell patients too is that sometimes you're used to feeling so shitty that when you start to feel good, you get uncomfortable because you don't know what it means to feel good. It's like, oh, I'm high. I'm like, no, you're not high. You're not high.
But then it feels really weird from that point. Yeah.
Truly about, don't judge the feeling. Don't judge the feeling. That's one of the most important. She didn't judge the feeling.
Point. That's a great point, because I think a lot of times with the medicine, the actual medicine that cannabis can give you is a completely different high than what the THC will give you. That's why, to me, like that rec and medical market crossover is too high, because I mean, like you said, a lot of these patients are used to just going out and buying fire weed because it set them down for the night, right? It didn't really help them, but they're used to getting that kick in the head where it's like, no, you don't want that kick in the head no more. You want that body buzz. You want those cannabinoids. You want your body to repair itself. Go eat something healthy. You know what I mean? Nothing drives you worse than seeing somebody who's unfit or out of shape or going through an issue physically, and you see them not doing anything to help them besides put their medicines in their mouth, and they go do the same thing that got them to that point, like you were saying, with their diet, their lifestyles. You know, and a lot of this has a lot to do with your own depression and your mental state as well, you know.
So that's what we teach too. What we teach patients is everything that you're doing or not doing in regards to health and lifestyle is going to affect how cannabis works for you. So the more healthy choices that you make, the cannabis is going to work better for you and probably going to save you money, right? Because there's things that we can do and don't do, and the more health and wellness activities that you pair with your cannabis, you're going to keep your tolerance low. It's key.
And once we get the insurance and the medical companies behind this, it'll be hopefully even easier for people to use. All right, guys. Well, here we go. This is Sister Suzanne talking about her experiences with cannabis. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Sherry, Tim, and Joe.
Go ahead.
My name is Suzanne Carroll, and I am a cannabis user. I am also a former sister of St. Joseph. I entered the convent a year after I graduated from high school, and I stayed in the convent for 5.5 years. And then I finally determined that that was not the path that God had chosen for me. So I left the convent and went back to secular life. It doesn't mean that I left my love of the church or my love of Christ. I took those with me and have been trying since then to use them for the good of other people. When I began using cannabis or began interacting with the cannabis nurses, I was at the point where I was actually losing hope, which is not who I ever was. But my pain had gotten to the point where I did not feel that I could participate fully in life at that point. But when I started to work with the cannabis nurses, that hope was rekindled. As I said, I was beginning to lose hope. And once I interacted with the cannabis nurses and finally began to be able to relieve some of my pain through the information and the product that they shared with me, I truly believe that I was then encouraged to reinvest myself in my sharing of my love of Christ with others around me. Cannabis helped me to grow because, as I said, when I started to lose hope, I was in a stagnant position. I didn't feel like I could make any forward progress, despite the fact that I was involved with the medical community and they were doing everything that they could to relieve my pain and suffering. But finally, through my interaction with the cannabis nurses and my use of cannabis, I actually felt like I had gotten to the point where I could participate fully in the life of Christ. Cannabis has brought healing to me by relieving the intense physical pain that I felt constantly. It has allowed me to grow emotionally to the point where I could, as I said, start to give back some of the things that I had that I felt Christ had prepared me to give to people around me. Cannabis, religion, and spirituality actually, for me, all form a cohesive whole. I am reminded that if we have faith, then we are prompted to pray. The important thing that I would like to point out is that prayer involves conversation with Christ. And when you talk to somebody, it's extremely important to listen for an answer. And that's one of the things that many of us forget when we are praying. We forget that we're actually talking to a person, and therefore we would expect some sort of response. The problem is the response we are usually looking for is, okay, I'll do what I want, what you want me to do. We need to remember that that's not always the answer that we get. We'll either get that for an answer, or no, I have something else in plan for you, or you know what, you just have to wait. It's not time yet, because healing comes in Christ allows us to suffer for some reason, and therefore healing comes from him, but it comes from him in his own time, not in our time. So we have to be patient and let him respond to our prayers in the way that he sees fit. When I'm dealing with the cannabis nurses, they often ask me, what would Jesus say? And I know exactly what he would say. He would say that marijuana is a plant that he gave us for a reason. And unfortunately, it has a stigma associated with it because some people have abused that plant. But we do have to remember that he gave it to us for a reason, and therefore he would expect us to use it appropriately. I gave permission to the cannabis nurses to interview me and tape it, record it.
All right, now that's a truly inspirational little video there for multiple reasons. A, this is an elderly woman, not to be rude or anything, but she's an older woman who, you know, is one of the demographics that are our fastest growing demographics in our cannabis industry right now. You know, and then, like you said, she's a nurse, or not a nurse, but a nun, right? So for me, that raises many questions for me, because it's like, you know, we look at the stigmas. We talked about stigmas. What is the acceptance of cannabis within the religious community? Are people willing to accept this? I mean, it seems like when we go back in time and we look at, you know, all these stories and all these trails that in the Egyptian times, you know, where it has to do with, you know, religion and whatnot.
Yeah, it was used so in so many different practices and so many different religions and so many different cultures, you know, and to increase consciousness for enlightenment. You know, the entheogens of it, you know, to be patients to be able to, you know, they have these ceremonies or, you know, these rituals, you know, to reach new levels of consciousness for healing. You know, spiritual healing is a real thing. You know, that's what I talked about at the American Cannabis Nurses Association. Spirituality is the root of cannabis care. You know, the first thing that it brought this nun was hope. right? So when you're brought hope, what happens? Hope stimulates something in your mind, and it brings you inspiration. And when we're inspired, we're in spirit. So hope, inspiration. The inspiration gives you motivation to do something different. And through do something different, you're going to grow. You grow in health. And as you grow in health, what are you going to do? You're going to heal. And one of the things I always say when I'm working with patients is healing is not the absence of illness or disease. It's just not. I've got a page long of problems, but I'm not living in the story of sickness. You know, healing isn't the absence of illness or disease. It's doing the best you can with what you have right here, right now.
You know, what I thought was great was
oh, go ahead, Joe.
Here's a woman that you know, devoted her life to Christ, devoted her life to the church, obviously was very passionate about what she wanted to do. And that's what I admire in people most, people that have passion and go after it, no matter what it may be. And, you know, anyone can have whatever feelings they want on the church, but for the most part, it benefits people and betters their life. And this woman couldn't do that anymore. And with cannabis, she was able to come back to what she devoted her life to. And I mean, that's what really gets me all tingly and makes me feel like this is something that has to be, you know, shared with people.
Yeah.
Do this thing now, you know?
You should see the 30
these addictive drugs that most of these doctors are putting these patients on. I think Sherry had made a great point earlier that stuck out to me was when you were talking about how doctors usually meet a patient, right? You look at their labs, you go over everything, and it's like, okay, ding, 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 ding. All right, you need this, and you already have an answer for the patient before you talk to the patient. I think we see a lot of times where we see, I don't want to say a misdiagnosis, but it's like the same thing with cannabis. Oh, this didn't work for you. Well, this works with a certain percentage of other people. We got to keep trying, right? But I think, you know, I personally went through a bad head injury where I literally had one drug for my head and 7 other drugs for all the side effects of my head. And it seemed like every time I went back, instead of taking anything away, they were adding stuff to it, which, I mean, it could be just my experience, but I'd like to say that that's probably typically shared by more people than not. Whether it's getting to know a patient, whether it's the time you have to share with a patient, whether it's just the way the medical industry is driven right now. I think the exposure to the pharmaceutical industry in the last few years has been huge, especially like what Joe and Sherry were all saying earlier. We're seeming to be coming back to let's get back to the land, let's get back to healthy living, let's get back to real food, let's get back to community. And whether that's a Corona issue or just the way we were heading prior to Corona, I think it's amazing to see that, because as a chef, like I was saying before, you see the trends, and now our trend is coming back to healthy foods, healthy cooking. We're seeing people taking time to read a recipe at home instead of buying a boxed meal, right? Because we can make it healthier. We can, you know, feed our kids better. Like you said, if we have the right nutrients in our bodies, if we're healthy, our minds are active, we're learning, and we are a productive member of society at that point, because like you said, you're inspired, you want to go do stuff, you want to go help people out, you want to go make this community even a better community that you're a part of. And at some point, just like, you know, our sister here, she's going to it's going to influence other people, right? So like
totally.
you said with
Well, when she gave back to the church, so the other interview, so you're going to have to show the other interview, the 30-minute one. She says that people are asking her, oh my God, you're back. Oh my God, you look so wonderful. What are you doing? And the first thing she says, I'm on cannabis oil. She is not hiding it. And she's like, you have to contact the green nurses. So she's really very, very vocal about it. And truly, I'm taking care of a lot of her neighbors. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it needs to start. I mean, like you said, it's how do we erase that stigma if we don't, if it's the black market driving it? You know, you can't, right? I mean, we need nurses, we need nuns, we need people in religion, we need people in higher powers to provide support for this, right? Unfortunately, it's like you said, we don't see it until someone we know gets sick. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And me and Tim talk about it a lot in politics, because it's like, you know, especially with politics on a federal level, we've seen a lot of these guys have been nothing but against cannabis, who are now working for companies, who are now making money off of cannabis, who are now supporting cannabis, who have now left politics to be in cannabis, which is, you know, these are some of the same people who have jailed people, written laws, and have really created an issue for a lot of these families, right? Whether we want to talk about social equity or just jailing. Next week, we're going to have Chris and Andy Martin on, who were raided and jailed and have fought a life of trying to do the right thing. We have OG Eddie Lepp coming on. You know, he was jailed for providing patients with medical marijuana. He told California to go fuck themselves, and they threw him in jail. He was one of the guys that helped get the bill passed, right? So here's somebody trying to take care of patients for like what we're trying to talk about here. You know, patients, caregiving, people that actually need the medicine. People even in legal states, people are getting arrested still for this kind of stuff, right? Like Joe was saying, he had to go under, he had to hide. Like, how do you help people, right? You know, we all have a calling here, you know what I mean? It's very hard to dismiss helping people for whatever reasons, right? You help. I mean, all of us here, especially, that's what I love about this industry, though. I think it's a very caring industry. When I first came to it, you know, race wasn't an issue. It seemed like we're all great friends. Sexuality was an issue. Male, female, transgender, it doesn't matter, right? I think it's one of those industries that really support women. You know what I mean? Like, as far as an industry that will really get behind a woman and support them through the process of this industry, I think the cannabis industry is great. I never saw these red flags or these issues. You know what I mean? That's why I think it's very welcoming to people. And you guys make it as easy as anybody, right? Because again, like you said, to hear from somebody like me, that's just that Joe guy, right? To hear from a nurse or a nun or somebody that you kind of value your life with, right? Because I mean, I think a lot of us, we really value our lives in nurses' hands, right? And then we're relying on them to tell us everything they need to tell us. And if they don't know about an endocannabinoid system and they don't know how this works, is that a doctor or a nurse that you should be talking to? And at this day and age, you know, with all the support we have, pretty much the whole country is supportive of medical cannabis. If to have a doctor that doesn't support it, then it doesn't mean you have to support it. Just give me an open-minded, you know, conversation about it. You know what I mean?
That's what I tell them. I say, if you don't support it, that's okay. But you still need to be able to provide the information to your patient so they can find it. You truly, you know, you have an endocannabinoid system. It's more important than your brain because it tells your brain what to do. So, you know, that's one of the things, is helping clinicians connect the dots to the endocannabinoid system and all of our different body systems is clearly essential. And so for them to have that knowledge, even if they can't do it or don't want to do it, at least have information that you can provide the resources for patients to get the accurate information that they need, because they truly should have the option. They should have the choice. It's of the utmost importance.
That's the biggest thing.
Stigma coming back in too.
Yeah.
That stigma that the doctors have against it, that they don't want to change. You know, they've known this for years to be dangerous, or they don't agree with it, and they're just not going to change. I can't tell you. I don't know if you remember, it was a while back when the program was early, the Providence Journal actually printed a bunch of the doctors that were going with it, that were approving cards. And the doctors were obviously pissed off. Their phones were blowing up like crazy. People were using it as a list of doctors to use to get a marijuana card, you know. And one of my patients, actually, his doctor's like, I'm not signing him anymore. He had to find a new doctor because of it, because of, you know, the paper blowing it up and saying, oh, these doctors actually allow this to happen. And they had to retract it and all that, but the damage was already done. And then it's the same stigma with the cops. I've had a couple of times when I was pulled over and I had stuff and I had to present the card, and they're telling me, well, I don't like that law. And I'm thinking to my head, like, well, that's not my problem. You know, I'm not going to say that to a cop at the middle of the night, but I'm like, it's not my issue what you like, you know. Yeah. It was, you know, being in the program so early, it was amazing to see how many people pushed against it. Just wouldn't want to hear anything. We called the East Providence Police Department to try to educate them on the laws and what they could do and what they couldn't do and how it worked. And they were just like, no, we don't need you to tell us what to do. This was, you know, the Patient Advocacy Coalition. Not more than a month later, I'm pulled over in East Providence and just got stepped all over. People asking me what my medical condition was, why I was allowed to have it. Again, you're not going to fight a cop in the middle of the night, so you're not allowed to ask me that. Haven't you ever heard of HIPAA? I was paranoid, you know, they stepped all over me. See, and this was a while back, but you still see it. These people that are just stuck up on the no, it's bad. How many people I dealt with that were like, my only problem with it is it's illegal. Like, are you serious? Is this plant that can really help you? You're not going to try it because the government told you it's illegal. And it goes back to Anslinger with those ridiculous things that he said, those horrible racial, you know, completely harmful things that our marijuana laws was based on up until last year. It was ridiculous. You know, the damage that the government and the media can do with the stigma we're still suffering from today.
And that's why I have my podcast too, is because I'm bringing on health professionals, doctors, nurses, and people in the community that you would never, ever, ever, ever think that we'd use cannabis. And I'm having them come on to share their compelling story of healing, why they're using it. And oftentimes, a lot of the nurses that are working in the industry are also patients themselves. So they're sharing the story of why they became a cannabis nurse and what brought them to the industry.
Yep.
You know, that's,
those are gotta be one of the two toughest industries to break that stigma in, right? Because I mean, as a medical professional, you're taught certain ways that these are good and certain ways that these are bad, right? And if you grew up as in the medical industry in the last 30 years or were trained the last 30 or 40 years, my mom was a nurse. She thinks it's the devil's lettuce, right?
lettuce.
I don't think she'd even try it today. She's a smoker. She has seizures. She's like the perfect candidate, textbook perfect candidate for CBD or THC or whatever she wants to try. I don't think she tries it. She might be watching the show, but I don't think she'll ever try it. So between the police, like, you know, the enforcement industries, which were literally built off of the war on drugs, right? Like a lot of these programs and policies and everything that we see nowadays, the reason why, you know, these local police departments have SWAT tanks and all these crazy gears because to fight a drug war, you know what I mean? It's not anything other than, right? Now that drug war, did we cause or not? Yeah, it's fueled, it's supported, right? But like that is the biggest stigma. I mean, me and Tim talk about it. Imagine being a cop in a state right now that you and it's gray area. Like here in Vermont, a lot of our laws are still kind of in a gray area stance. So like I actually kind of feel bad for police at this point. I mean, granted, there are a bunch of dicks out there, but a lot of these police are really put in a position where they have to make these personal calls, right? And like, you know, just like we said, these guys have been arresting us for years, and now tomorrow we're going to tell them they can't do that no more. You know what I mean? A lot of these stigmas. You know what I mean? I love it when I see a cop, a nun, a doctor, anybody come out and say, I use cannabis, right? And we've seen a lawsuit going on in New Jersey right now with an officer that was fired for having a medical card. So there's a lot of things still going on about that. And as we're talking here, guys, I just wanted to bring this up before we click over to Tim here real quick. The U.S. passes a bill to expedite and expand medical cannabis research. That was just reported 48 minutes ago in Marijuana Business Daily, December 4th, a full house passing landmark measure to effectively legalize marijuana federally by removing the plant from the Federal Controlled Substance Act. The bill, the MORE Act, must be approved by the current Republican-controlled Senate, which we're talking about these people that just will not get over these stigmas. There's one of them right there, Mitch McConnell, who's in our Senate. So a lot of this MORE Act stuff that we've seen in Congress has been great, guys. It's a huge step forward. But Tim, will it go anywhere? I mean, this is where you come in. I mean, we're talking about Mitch McConnell. I know there's still a chance, but is there a chance?
No. Not as long as Mitch McConnell is still the Senate Majority Leader. There's two ways to look at this, though. There is the actual reality of, does it get through the Senate, and then would the Cheeto in the White House sign off on it? I don't know. It can't get through the Senate. Mitch McConnell has sworn off, made no adult use. If Democrats happen to win both runoff elections in Georgia, maybe. Would a Biden sign it? I mean, there's a lot of open questions there. It certainly would have a better chance. If the Democrats do not win both those Senate races in Georgia, there's no chance. But that's only one aspect, actually getting this thing through. But there's the perception component of it, which is the United States as normalization. People seeing this, people seeing the House pass the MORE Act, not just a committee, not just get to discussion, but actually on a solid vote. It's invaluable. It's invaluable in getting people to understand that this can happen. It's invaluable to see that there are that many legislators who are on board with this. It's taking steps towards when we will get there. But we've been incredibly successful at the state level. This has been one of the most powerful grassroots, campaigns, most effective that I've ever seen. In the last 10 years, we've just seen literally every year a march, with one exception, Arizona in 2018, every single state that has put this to the ballot initiative has passed it. Every single one. South Dakota, medical and adult at the same time. Why not? Let's do it. Let's go from 0 to 180. And so when you see the House vote on this, when you see that level of support, even though Mitch McConnell is blocking this from really moving forward right now at the federal level, that gives activists in the rest of the states a lot of encouragement. It shows that the tide is turning. We've went from when, cannabis reform was the third rail of politics. You didn't even mention it. You had to be tough on crime. To one body of our legislative body, which, from talking to me, I too believe is fundamentally broken. But, really, and it wasn't close. It was pretty solid. Interestingly enough, of course, like everything across, right down party lines, I believe there were 5 Republicans that crossed over and voted yes, and 4 Democrats that voted no. But pretty much, we're just such a polarized. But there's also just a poll that came out that showed that 50% of registered Republicans support legalization. So at the individual level, there's something that we can agree on. I've always said cannabis is the one thing that can draw the left and the right and the blue and the red, the liberal, all together. Is cannabis. Everyone agrees. We all like to get stoned.
If we all had a bong, we'd all get along.
We'd all go along. And from a medical purpose, you're seeing people even who may not want to get stoned or aren't a stoner or don't want to use it recreationally, figuring out that cannabinoid medicine is the future. Sherry, can you imagine when we fully start to understand cannabinoid profiles and how cannabinoid specific profiles affect specific receptors within the system, and then we can start targeting direct strains and direct profiles to actual illnesses? Okay, if it's joint pain, that's this cannabinoid profile deals with that the best. If anxiety, it's this. PTSD, it's this. When we really can dive in and start understanding the complex interactions, terpenes, cannabinoids, and our endocannabinoid system, it's the future. This is the future of medication.
And think about this, Tim. Think about this. So there is such a concept of nutritional genomics. So looking at DNA SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms, and looking at what people are eating and not eating and how it can affect their health. Well, can you imagine having that to be developed to be able to look at people's endocannabinoid systems, their receptors, and their DNA around that, and how we can truly target through that information as that starts to evolve. Truly, it's going to happen.
This is how we're meant to heal. This is how we are meant. This is how we are designed. We're not designed to take Prozac and this pill and that pill and 5 pills to take care of the side effects of those pills that you're taking, and then the side effects of those pills, and these pills. And, crazy. Get people with the Monday through Friday thing with 18 pills in each one just to remember what you got to take on each. It's not what we were designed to do.
No,
that's not what our bodies are designed for. Our bodies are designed with an endocannabinoid system. Our bodies are designed, nutrition, exercise, these are all components. And the more we can understand that and get away from this treating the symptom instead of treating the disease, because it's a profit model, because these pharmaceutical companies they don't do this out of the goodwill of their heart. If they're publicly traded, they've got stockholders. If they're private, they've got their owners. And it's all about profit. There's no profit in curing a condition. There's a profit in continuously treating the symptoms of the condition, because then you got to get refills. You got to buy more.
Yeah.
So, and cannabis is a way that we can start taking a fundamental leap away from that model into a holistic internal medicine. How is our body meant to get back to homeostasis? How is our body meant to deal with these things? And the cannabinoids are a huge component of that.
Well, that's why this is an interesting bill right here, this Medical Marijuana Research Act. I mean, again, guys, it just got passed today by the House. By the Congress, and now it's on the Senate floor. And now we have 2 big bills on the Senate floor that have to do with medical research for cannabis, and we have one, obviously, the MORE Act, right? Everyone's saying nothing even on the medical side. Do we think Mitch McConnell will look at it the way we just talked about it? There's medical value. This is something that we need research.
Maybe the research. I could maybe the research, maybe the Safe Banking Act. There are a couple of pieces of legislation that I could see potentially having a chance. The MORE Act will not. Federal decriminal, descheduling. Not when Mitch McConnell's in charge. Not unless he has a major change of heart. We can't even get around to helping us out there in COVID. I mean, it's insane, and it's just such a personalized agenda, and it's so self-absorbed. It's my worldview is right, everybody else is wrong, and all I'm going to do is forward my worldview. That's not what our legislative body is supposed to be. We're supposed to be a representative democracy. It's not supposed to matter what the person we elect thinks. It's supposed to be what the constituents who have put that person into office to be the voice of those constituents. That's what democracy was meant to be, and it's not what it is anymore.
Wouldn't it be easier?
Money hungry, and they are in control, and they are going to do whatever it takes to get reelected. and to stay on the good side of the massive hordes. It has nothing to do with the people, other than to con them into electing them again. People like Lindsey Graham, people like Mitch McConnell get reelected. These are people who don't care at all, have no clue what it is like to be a normal human being in this country. Otherwise, cannabis reform would have passed. We'd have COVID, stimulus. People out of jobs would be able to survive it. We're about to run out on unemployment. We're about to run out on these, eviction moratoriums. We can't get anything for it. And that's frustrating. That's unbelievable.
It's a big piss and
not going to get better. Joe Biden is the first president, 86 years, I believe was the stat, who's been elected without a mandate, meaning without both parties. He's not even be able to get his cabinet picks approved. And so, the thought of federal cannabis reform with the amount of dysfunction right now, that's not what I get excited about. What I get excited about is the visuals. What I get excited about is the perception. What I get excited about is the normalization. People are starting to understand this isn't a dangerous drug. It is not an addictive drug in the sense of alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, opiates. Those are physically addicting drugs. Cannabis is not.
With deaths.
Can people smoke too much cannabis? Sure.
Right?
People can eat too much McDonald's and eat too much sugar, and
people can die of drinking too much water.
Yes, thank you. Water intoxication, right? Absolutely.
I'm not kidding. People have died.
Water intoxication is a real thing.
It's real.
Yep.
You drown yourself virtually.
Yep.
So too much of anything is bad. But when I hear people talk about the addictive nature, and it's just like big tobacco, I want to beat them over the head, because it's not. It's a lie.
My funny question is this. I know Sherry has to go. She has another podcast to do, so thank you for your time. Just one quick question before you go.
Here, Sherry. This is going to be fun.
I'll throw it out there. I mean, we're all arguing over research, right? For, against, it's not going to prove, it's not going to prove. Why don't we just let it happen? And then once the research comes back, we can make an educated point. Like, oh, it was bad. See, I told you. Or it's not bad. See, I told you, right? Like,
I'll give you one further, Joe. Why don't we look at the Israeli research that they have been doing for the last 2 decades? They've identified most of the cannabinoids we know. And why don't we just look at that and go, hey, it's been done? No, but of course, we're Americans, so, we have to do it ourselves. But the DEA is going to hold this up forever.
The thing about research, too, that's really important is that the minute a research study is done, it's outdated. That's number one. Number two, there is something to be said about anecdotal research. Okay, anecdotal research should be driving the real research. Think about it. All of these different experiences that our patients are having, why aren't those anecdotal stories?
Millions of them. Millions of
millions and millions and
maybe all right, but when you just see the same story from millions of people over an extended time period, sure, you're absolutely right. Oh, that's just anecdotal. We can't use that.
I'm sorry, but anecdotal, you tell a patient that has no evidence of cancer cells that's anecdotal. That had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, unresectable tumor, failed chemo, failed radiation, CBD and a little bit of Rick Simpson oil, cancer's gone, alive, well. Tell me, that is something that should be researched.
I'll take that over injecting radioactive chemicals into my body any day of the week.
Exactly. So you guys, I have to go. Thank you so much. I'm actually doing a show tonight with a nurse, a cannabis nurse. His name is Cannabis Nurse Matt. And he is actually created a program on compassion fatigue. So we're going to be talking about cannabis nursing, compassion fatigue, and how compassion fatigue affects caregivers, nurses, doctors, servicemen. So for people that are interested, hop on.
That's a huge discussion to have right there. A lot of people should be tuning in. That show starts at 8, correct?
It starts at 8. Yep, right at 8 o'clock.
Right, and you can find it at the Green Nurse, right?
The Green Nurse. Yeah, I'll put a little tag right in there, right on the Facebook page. But thank you guys so much for including me in the conversation. I'm really grateful. Truly here to bring more hope, more inspiration for growth and healing, and to destigmatize this plant so we can carry on with our lives. Right?
It was great to have you today.
All right. I'll see you guys all next week.
Yes, definitely.
Sherry, take care.
Okay, bye.
So guys, make sure we tune in tonight. It's going to be another great show. The Green Nurses, they provide a lot of awesome content that we're really excited to be teaming up with, to be able to share and bring to you guys and put on our platforms as well. They are an award-winning show. They actually beat our show out once, so it's actually kind of fun to team up with them. Huge amount of respect for them. And as you can see, Sherry does know what she's talking about. I mean,
She's
it's the
fantastic.
passion of hers. These are the stigmas that we hope to bring onto the show to break, because again, lawyers, doctors, police officers.
We need doctors. I think a lot of lawyers at this point kind of get it. We've, at least criminal defense lawyers, we've realized how absurd this is for years. The medical profession has been just unbelievably difficult with this, and it gets to where exactly what you were talking about before, Joe, which you were spot on with, law enforcement. When you have spent your career telling people that this is a horrible substance, you can't use it, and it's dangerous, and it's going to kill you. And when you spent your whole career arresting people and destroying lives, and when you spent your whole career as a judge sentencing people to decades, in some cases, in jail for this plant, and then all of a sudden, you have to accept the fact that what you have been doing has been wrong, that you're actually the bad guy. That, again, it's a mental leap that a lot of people in those positions can't take. And I believe doctors are in the same boat. They've been saying for years, this is drugs, blah, 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 addiction, it's going to kill you, it's going to kill you, it's going to kill you. So the thought all of a sudden that there's an endocannabinoid system that's actually better utilization, better for the human body than the pharmaceutical crap that they've been feeding us for 50 years, it creates a kind of dissonance that they just can't get it. They can't get it. So the more that we see are willing to step up and say, you know what? I fucked up. I was wrong. I was incorrect about this. I am now learning and evolving my thoughts and realizing that this is good. The more we see of that, the better. Because when one does that, then maybe a second will. And when the second does, maybe a third does. When the third does, maybe 5 do. And when 5 do, maybe 10 do. And that's how we get through that. So it's so critical to see judges, law enforcement, doctors, the medical profession. One of the biggest prohibition groups here in Vermont is the Association of Pediatricians. These pediatricians hate it. They have just been vicious about trying to get this squashed. It makes absolutely no sense. It's easier
we
to
talk
take
about
marijuana than alcohol. Why is that? Because the alcohol is behind the counter. It's not that they can't get it. It's not that they won't get it. It's that it's a challenge. It makes it more difficult. So why not put cannabis behind the counter and make it more difficult? You hear the argument, oh, well, that's not going to stop teens' use. No, but it'll decrease.
Yeah.
You see that in every legal jurisdiction. Make it a little bit harder for them. Takes away the economic incentive of slinging fucking 10 bags in high school, because people just go to a dispensary now. That's why they don't sell bootleg alcohol anymore. There's no point.
Yep.
And these are just common sense things. You would think the doctors who have, generally, allegedly high intellectual capabilities would figure this out. And it's just, the only reason I can think of is because of exactly that. By embracing this and by supporting it, it's acknowledging that I have been wrong for most of my career, and I am too smart to ever be wrong. So,
at this point,
that's kind of just how I've, seen this.
It's a hard pill to take.
Yeah.
It's a hard pill to swallow. Like you said, it's like, how do you swallow a pill that basically tells you you've been doing something that you've been trying to do to the best of your ability for years, you did it wrong. You know what I mean? Or you're part of that problem, or, you know what I mean? Especially when it comes to the policing of the drug war, you know what I mean? How do these guys wake up? A lot of these guys get hung over these raids, and now they're like, they go to these raids, they don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like, we were seeing these guys raiding hemp farms, for Christ's sakes, and destroying all these things because they don't, and these people have paperwork, they have everything. It's like we said before, there's these gray areas where the sheriff goes, I don't give a fuck, this is how we used to do it. You know what I mean? This is a drug.
They always have discretion.
Right.
Police always have discretion. A police officer, law enforcement can see somebody jaywalking. That does not mean they need to call in backup and tackle the person, with hit him with a baton and a taser. Because a lot of times they see somebody jaywalking, they ignore it because it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, but to some people use discretion. But are we allowing the police to use this discretion, or are we giving them too much? Because it almost seems like to me like the excuse now is the police will see something, just write it up because, hey, whatever, I think it's illegal, and then let the courts figure it out. You know what I mean?
That's a lot of the big mentality in law enforcement. But it's a selective, because it is this complete concept of what's right, what's wrong, what are we going to bust? And the war on drugs is dangerous for law enforcement. That's absolutely true, except generally for cannabis. Now, all right, if you got a huge illegal commercial grow in California that's protected by guys with AKs that might have organized cartel ties, sure. There you can always point to the extremes where, yes, okay, in some rare instances cannabis poses a threat to law enforcement, but 99%. The stoner on the couch with the bong, the guy with the joint in the car. Are they going to pull out a gun and shoot at a cop? No. Are they going to act like, somebody cranked out on meth who hasn't slept in 3 days? No. They're going to go, and then law enforcement knows it. They're easy. It's a low hanging fruit. We can get our bust. We can get our numbers up. We can look good. Maybe we'll get some cash out of it. Maybe we can seize a car. Maybe we can seize a house. They love that down south. That's a forfeiture, man.
Oh my God,
I've read cases where a kid had like an eighth or quarter in the bedroom. Cops stormed, find it, and seized the parents' house.
Well, we all know, and I believe you're on the show for that when we talked to Cool, right? Who recently passed, and it's probably a big part of all this was he was working with the county for a grow in Arizona. He was in line with everything. The feds came and they got him for one plant over his count. One plant. Now he has an operation. He's got licenses. He's got everything legal. He's one plant over the count. They seized everything from his house to his truck to even his trophies and awards, all of his assets, all of his finances, everything in the bank. He seized everything. They ended up putting the guy into a motel for the last few days of his life. And then when they seized everything, he is just like what Nurse Sherry was talking about. Here's somebody who's on a regimen of cannabis products to stay alive. He's dying. He's got cancer. He's not in good health. And when they took it all away from him, look what the end result was. And I hate to say it, he passed, right? Like we've seen this with patients, we've seen this with people, we've seen this with kids that get stuck in the judicial system because their parents were prescribing them with oil and they were having seizures and they end up in the hospital, and the obviously the judicial system doesn't know what to do because they're looking at a law. Like you said, they're just trying to look at a law and then no one's taking any insight or any thought or it's like they just look at the law book and go, that's it. Like you said, there's no discretion anymore. You know what I mean? Oh, you smoked an eighth of weed, we're going to throw you in jail and make a mockery of you. And sadly, I think in this day and age, I was in Boston. I was one of the last few people to get arrested for weed before they basically allowed it to not be a charge. Basically, I got an eighth. I had like 90 days worth of probation. I had almost $600 worth of fines. The judge was not happy with me. She's screaming at me because she was mad because the law changed. You know what I mean? Like, that's not my fault. It's kind of like what Joe was saying earlier. It's not my fault you guys made the laws. You know what I mean? Like, these are the laws. I'm trying to abide by them. Here's my medical card. Yeah, I'm trying to do everything right. You know what I mean? Very weird. You know what I mean? In Mass, I had, like Joe was saying, Mass had to become a patient in Mass 20 years ago. You could get a medical card. I was told to because of that head injury I was telling you about, where I was on 7 or 8 different meds for the one med for my head. They wanted me to go to a neurosurgeon and get my medical card. No, not in Mass at that day and age. No, the police knew who you are. They come knock on your door. They come check you out. You became a point of interest to somebody because of a medical card. Like Joe was saying, the minute you hand over a medical card, now here comes all these questions, right? Like questions that legally you don't have to answer. What's your medical problem? It doesn't matter to you. I have a card. Use my card. You know what I mean? Like, there's laws to follow, and there's ways we should do things. The thing that kills me the most is when we're at events and I'm talking to somebody, and the cop that put that guy away for 6 years walks by, and he's working the event, and he's making his overtime, and he's enjoying the cannabis events, and we saw a lot of that in Mass with like the Reliable Bud events, especially with the legality coming as fast and hard as it did. You know what I mean? And what do you have to do when you have events? You have to hire a cop, right? So, we talk about that a lot. When you turn an eye, you can go to a concert for the last 15 years and smoke weed in the venue and nobody really ever got arrested. But the minute you do it anywhere else, that same cop will treat you very differently. You know what I mean? So it's weird acceptances and stigmas that surround it, which is crazy. Hopefully we can get through this. I'm really hoping that this Medical Marijuana Act can go through for the research. And hopefully we can start there, because we got to start somewhere. Something's got to pass the Senate. I mean, we can't have bills just piling up there. It's kind of like you said. We have 7 out of 10 Americans that support legalization of cannabis, that support medical cannabis, that support everything and anything cannabis. I don't understand why our Senate is where we're at. You know what I mean? Like, now we're seeing, like you guys said, bipartisanship is huge. I mean, we're seeing pros and cons on both sides.
Is now letting health professionals use psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybin. Like, everybody else is like rocking it past us. The cannabis thing's old news. It's really time to catch up here,
Well, my next question was, I hope you saw that, was, I mean, as we're sitting here still trying to talk about getting our states recreationalized, or even just decriminalized on a federal level, or changed, or however we want to proceed with that. we're getting run around, man. We talked about China last week and how crazy advanced they were and where they're going. And then now, now we have Canada talking about psychedelics. You know what I mean? Like they're going to allow doctors to prescribe them. Like
it's been shown. Psilocybin has an absolute demonstrative impact on PTSD and depression. And in small doses, so does ketamine. And that's why this whole concept of, oh, it's an illegal drug on the Controlled Substances Act, so we can't touch it, we can't look at it, and you need a DEA permit to even think about it. It's just, why aren't we studying these things? Why aren't that? What are they worried that the scientist conducting the research is gonna all of a sudden go crazy? I mean, come on. There's just, if you don't even have a good justification, it's just another onset of this war on drug mentality.
How much pressure is coming from the pharmaceutical companies to stop this research? I mean, marijuana is a big huge chunk out of
money.
That's what it's coming down to.
Man. No, of course.
Hemp has been getting kept.
God forbid we learn how to heal ourselves.
So yeah, the doctors have gone in for it because they're getting pressured by the pharmaceuticals that they've been working for. The lobbyists saying no, we don't have enough research. It's all about the money. Follow the money.
What we're saying, it's really easy to walk in with that.
It's the runaround. This is like the DEAs. Every time they see the DEA, they try to say, you know what, cannabis shouldn't be Schedule 1. The DEA says, well, you haven't exhausted your administrative remedies yet, so you can't go to court. So you need to file a petition with us. Well, DEA, we did file a petition with you in 1994, in 2006, in 2016. You haven't even addressed the one we filed 32 years ago. Well, it's exactly. We haven't, finished yet, so you haven't exhausted your remedies.
We still have,
and the merry-go-round.
We still have places.
It's just
we still have,
anything else. Everybody would be looking at it, going, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" Instead, we go.
We have researchers. We literally have researchers suing the DEA right now because of the fact that they were supposed to be allowed to research this product years ago, and the research hasn't been allowed to start yet. So literally, the DEA is cock blocking so many different things with cannabis. Well, that's one of our biggest headaches right there.
It's signed in triplicate, and it needs to then go to Joe, and he's on vacation, so he won't be back until 2024.
Right, but then we can see like places like Penn State, MIT, all these other colleges actually do their own research that, again, the federal government won't look at and say is legit, like you say with the Israeli research. I mean, everybody's looking at the Israeli research, and
of course, they've had the most comprehensive cannabis research program on the planet.
Mm-hmm. And for us to ignore that is what kills me. Like we said, research. I keep hearing about research. And it's like, I see Pfizer selling a drug that they just barely got out. They're already injecting people. They're already, it's already having side effects that we don't want to see. But we can't get we can't get anybody to talk about what CBD oil does for seizures to a 4-year-old kid. That's where I get lost.
Of propaganda. This is the impact of 70 years of targeted propaganda.
Exactly.
Again, the war on drugs is nothing but social control. It's openly acknowledged, clearly. I know clearly saying, of course we knew the drugs weren't that deadly. How else are we going to control the damn hippies and the damn blacks? How are we going to do it? I mean, it's disgusting. It is disgusting, and it's not even hidden. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not, oh, 9/11 didn't happen. No, it's documented. It's a fact. And still people just don't get it. And you'd be amazed how many people ask, well, why is cannabis illegal? Because it's a dangerous drug. No, it's not why it's illegal. Not at all. It's not dangerous at all. It's illegal because they didn't like black jazz musicians in the 1920s and 30s, nor did they like Latino workers coming up from Mexico. And then this was just doubled down on by Nixon, who saw a real convenient way to be able to get the people he hated. The hippies and the African-Americans were pissed, and they had every right to be. We had all this civil rights legislation, and these are Americans, other human beings, just like us, and just like everybody, just like all of us, brown eyes, blue eyes, brown skin, white skin, yellow skin, we're all fucking people. But they're made second-class citizens. So yeah, they were pissed, and they should be, and anybody who would be in that type of a situation would be. But, using something, like the war on drugs to have an excuse to arrest entire sections of our population, to be able to control the city, to be able to, that's just, it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally wrong on so many levels.
And
And it's so hard to get people to see that, to take the blinders off, to realize that this is not about danger. It's not about health. It's about social control.
We talk about the war on drugs, right? And we can all probably agree one of the hardest, most focused place on the war on drugs was Colombia, right? Through the cocaine and all that stuff in the 80s and 90s, right? When we talk about our stigmas in America, and I read articles like what I just read, it blows my mind, because now the Colombian Senate this week has also approved the legalization of recreational cannabis, not only just medical cannabis, but recreational. So when we're talking about war on drugs, war-ravished countries, right, due to the drug war, and then we see Colombia come out with the Senate that approves the legalization of recreational cannabis. Like, what is America doing here? We're talking about Mexico. We see Colombia. We're talking about Canada doing mushrooms and furthering legalities on many different options.
They just had the Colombian Senate just introduced a bill that would legalize cocaine.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another question.
Attempt to try to crush the cartels and take away the economic incentive for the black market, which is, it works. Yeah. We've seen it, prohibition.
Well, that's a huge talking point. What you just said right there is the decriminalization of all drugs. We've seen, here in Vermont, we've seen like the opioid, safe houses, so people can,
safe injection
do their thing safely, right? This raises a lot of question. This raises a lot of eyebrows. This really draws a line down the middle of this debate. A lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people don't see it. But how does this work, Tim? I mean, when we talk about decriminalizing a country or anything with drugs, I mean, we've seen it work, but people are freaking out because they're like, what's going to happen, right? Like they think it's going to go crazy. What typically?
Right. Everybody lives in this black-white mentality, right or wrong, this or that. You have it in completely illegal and everybody has to go to jail, or else you legalize it and it's available in every 7-Eleven. And oh my God, kids are going to be, no. You switch the paradigm from a criminal justice and an incarcerative criminal activity to a health issue, like we did with cigarettes. The only addictive, this is another great fact. Since 1965, what is the only addictive drug, and by addictive drug, I mean really addictive drugs, that we have seen a significant decrease in societal use? And that's tobacco. We've gone from 68% of adult smoke back in the early 60s to like I think it's under 19% now. And do we do it by flash banging houses and arresting people and shooting up neighborhoods? No, we did it by an educational campaign and showed what it can do. But at the end of the day, if you choose to, that's your choice. If we were to do the same things, regulate serious drugs, that's fine. They don't need to be available in 7-Eleven and every convenience store and picking up, 8-ball of Coke. No, have them regulated, have it for adult use. Make sure there's a process by which to get them. I wrote a whole paper on my fantasy model of what this would look like. And instead of all the money of incarceration and law enforcement that we put into this war on drugs, we put it into rehabilitation facilities. We put it into doctors. We put it into health treatment for addictive disorders. And if somebody has a problem, yes, they're going to do it, and they can do it, and they can get it legally, and it's cheap, and you get away from all the crime. There's no more breaking into houses. All those societal ills that surround drug use aren't because of the drugs. They're because of the prohibition. That's why there's so much money. That's why there are cartels. That's why cocaine does not cost that much to make or produce. Cannabis does not cost that much to make or produce. Heroin does not cost that much to make or produce. These are all costs associated with the prohibition. So you have it cheap. So all of a sudden you have it pure, you have it clean. I'm fine with a building, a state building where you have to register and go in to get your harder drugs and then do them there. But they're clean. We're not having overdoses because of cut product. You're not having, people, not knowing what they're doing. You have healthcare on site in case there is an accidental overdose. They can immediately have medical care. It's cheap, probably free. When you compare to the amount of money that's used to incarcerate and to prosecute and to, if we took all of the drug offenses out of the federal and state criminal justice systems. I've never seen a report. I've never seen anyone actually try to figure it out. But the amount of money that would be saved, that would not be utilized, is astronomical. So you put a drug center in, and you let them go, and it's a nice building, and they can be administered. And you know what? Every time they go, they have the option of counseling. Maybe it's a mandatory 30-minute counseling. Maybe it's the option of counseling. I'll tell you, you know as well, you know my background. When I was a very, very serious drug addict in the early 2000s, when I was just absolutely out of my mind, I didn't like it. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to get better. I wanted to be a normal human being. I didn't know how. I didn't have that opportunity in front of me. If every time I had to go re-up and get my shit, I had to sit with a counselor and talk about it. Maybe the first 5 or 6 times, yeah, whatever. I want to go get high. But eventually you're going to start listening. And eventually you're going to say, you know what? There is another life. There is another identity for me. There is something I can do to get away from this. And those are the people that do have, like myself, with the serious addiction problems. There are people who can do a line of coke here or there and be fine with it. Just like there are people who can have a drink or two and be fine with it. And there are people who have one drink and that leads to 15 and they're blacking out, behind the wheel of their car. And that's individual chemistry. Know thyself. Know what you can and can't do. I know I can smoke cannabis pretty much all day, all night and get to work and function and be, I'm sitting here getting stoned now. We can have a great conversation. I can't do a line of coke. Believe me, that would not be good for me. I can have a beer. Yeah. I have very little, I'll have one beer and I'll be fine. But I have very close friends and family members that can't have one drink. They can smoke weed. I know some people can't smoke weed. It doesn't work for them. But they like to have a drink, So it's not about the substance, it's about the person. And that's why this incarcerative model, this whole criminal justice model is just wrong. Because it's not about the substance. It's about us. And all of the ills, all of the scary shit, all of the gang wars and the shootings and the break-ins and the crime, all of that is not about the substance either. It's about the prohibition. Just like we saw prohibition here in the United States with, the Al Capone days and the bootleggers and the shooting up the speakeasies. Gee, legalizing, all that went away. Put it behind a counter and charge $9 for a bottle of Absolute. No more black market. No more black market because there's no economic incentive to have that black market.
I think you said that. I think you made
rocket science. This is not brain surgery. You know what I mean? We have such a low opinion of our neighbors and our community members. We legalize drugs. All these people are going to go crazy. Well, not me. I'm responsible, but everybody else, my neighbors, they're hard. A little faith in humanity. Come on.
Right.
Anyway, that's my tangent. I'm sticking to it.
Right. Well, I think you make a great point, and this is something I've noticed with friends of mine who battle addictions. Obviously I'm a weed addict, but that's it's not even the same really. Like, do I want to
addiction?
Enjoy it? Yeah, sure.
Broad term.
Is it physical? I've seen people with the physical, with the physicality, like you said. It's like when you try to kick the drug, it's hard to do. So getting that support is hard. A lot of these people surround themselves with people doing the same things. I had a best friend of mine for years who struggled with it, and every time he'd kick it, all of his friends that did those drugs came back to him. And guess what the first thing you want to do? It's like when you quit drinking alcohol, everyone, what's the first thing you get? Oh, let's go have a drink and celebrate. Oh shit, you quit drinking. You know what I mean? Like, there's, like you said, there's not a system where you can turn to and go, help me. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, I don't want to do this no more. I know what it's doing to my life. I know what it's doing to my family. I've seen what it's doing. But 10 minutes later, when that urge kicks in, it's like nothing you can control. You're on a one, like you said, you're robbing houses, you're stealing from your mom, you're doing things that you never thought you would do to satisfy this urge, because the pain that you put on that now, if you don't satisfy, is you can't describe it to most people, right? I've seen people go through withdrawals. I've seen people go through 2 weeks in bed where they just had to sweat it out, and that's not something I'd ever wish on
anyone. Kill you. It's hard.
Which
legs aching, sweating, hot, cold. You can't think. You can't move. It is. That is a physical addiction. That is that is where your body, alcohol, is a physical addiction. It can kill you if you are enough of an alcohol dependency and quit cold turkey.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna die smoking weed. You sure the heck ain't gonna die quitting it either. You might get a little grouchy. Or cranky, but if you don't have weed for a couple days, at least not anybody I know is not breaking into their neighbor's house and trying to pawn the wedding ring because they couldn't get a dime bag. Maybe they're a little obnoxious, maybe they have a little hard time falling asleep, maybe, in the extreme cases. But most people I know take tolerance breaks whenever they want. They take 3 weeks off, so when I smoke again, I can get high. There are tons of people who do that. You know what? And they're not in bed dying, and they're not breaking into houses, and they're not fiending out, and they're not in cold sweats and can't function. How do you compare the two? I've spent the last 10 years trying to quit cigarettes. I have spent 10 years trying to quit nicotine. I'm fine. It's 2.5 weeks now without a cigarette. Ooh, back on Jantex, another pharmaceutical.
There you go.
I was able to quit heroin. I was able to quit IV injections of cocaine. Quit all that. Quit the fucking cigarettes. So, you know, that's addicting. That is a massive addiction. And, you know, it's a wonderful, the way we've gotten people off the cigarettes is, again, not by arresting them, but by educating them. It's a health matter. Tobacco is not criminal. It's health. You want to die of cancer? You want to lose 5 years off your life? You want to breathe through a damn tube in your neck? Keep smoking. You know, and that's it. We need to teach people, you know, if you're going to do heroin all the time, it's not good. You're going to probably die. And at worst, you're just going to rot away to nothing. Too much cocaine, your heart's going to explode. Are we going to arrest you for it? No. And if you choose to do so and your heart explodes, well, you know, kind of Darwin here. You know? But to criminalize, to lock people up, to ruin lives, to destroy families. How about just educating? How about just teaching people? How about having a little faith in what we can learn? And again, we have examples of it working. We've seen that with nicotine. We've seen that, you know. So by educating people, we can think about it. Think about it, if we had no more cartels, we had no more drug violence, and we had no more war on drugs, and we had no, you know, all of the incarcerated people who are locked up for nothing more than wanting to change their perception, something people want to do all the time. And then you want to start getting really disgusting about it, how we have legal pharmaceuticals for those with health insurance that do the exact same thing as the street drugs that we're locking up the poor people for. Now you're really starting to get into what are we doing here?
Or a recovery drug is one molecule off and the government sells it. It's
same exact effect.
It's
same exact effect.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But it's one molecule off, so that's good and that's bad. Does the exact same fucking thing. Again, you know, and I just, it's so
control. You know? Well, all these industries are driven by money. You know, they're driven by money, power. You made a bunch of great points with all this, whether it's food-driven industry, whether it's nicotine. I mean, two of the most addictive things that we know on this planet, actually, the number one most addicting thing is, and I think people forget this all the time, it's something that we love and we eat every day. It's sugar. You know what I mean? The number one and most addictive substance on the planet is sugar, and I think number two is nicotine after that, if I remember it right.
Again, I mean, you know, there's also addiction. Addiction is such a broad term. There's so many metrics can be used to evaluate what addiction is. Is it something you can't stop doing? Is it something that causes a problem in your life? Is it something that causes a physiological dependence? Is it something that causes a mental dependence? Is it, you know, there's so many variations. It's like, you know, Eskimos got 35 words for snow. There should be 35 words for addiction, because an addiction to running, an addiction to McDonald's, and an addiction to heroin are nothing alike. You can't equate them. But people do when it's convenient. And people do when they want to make an argument. But it's not real. It's not true. It's not honest.
Yeah. It takes a lot of looking in the mirror. That's where I think the number one thing is that people have the hardest part of it. They want to blame somebody, they want to blame everything else. And a lot of it's just your approach to it, the way your outlook on it. You know what I mean? If you're gonna blame everybody for your problems and go drown in a bottle, that's a dark cave or a dark hole to climb into. You know what I mean? It's very hard to get out of, especially when you do have support. I mean, some people can't even handle support. So it's interesting, man. See how people respond and work with it and allow it to happen. But it's like we said, you know, we talk about sugars and alcohol and tobaccos, and when we put cannabis in this talk, it really doesn't even work, right? It doesn't even come across anyways. But that's pretty much all we have for the news this week, except for one last thing, which I want to make sure everybody realize now. In Maine right now, the number one agricultural product is cannabis. So congratulations to Maine, because this is what we want.
That was quick.
Legitimately, right? And we're talking about lush farmland area too. You know what I mean? So this is something that is really unique for Maine. I mean, it's not like we have, you know, we're not, you know, Midwest and with all these, you know, flat, you know, fields everywhere. But Maine is really well known for agriculture. To see that cannabis is now the number one agricultural product in the state is huge. Most states need to be this way. You know what I mean? We want to see this on the industrial side. We want to see it on the rec side. We want to see it on the medical side. Their program is doing great. So huge shout out to Maine. Again, we're seeing all these records getting broken everywhere. We just need to get the government to come on board with us a little bit more. Hopefully we'll see some of these bills and acts that are sitting on the Senate floor go somewhere, but as you know, we talk about a lot, the chances of that happening are slim to none, so don't be upset if it's not going to happen. We are going to, man, it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks within this next new year, couple of weeks with the coronavirus, legality, all these crazy things. But that being said, we're gonna get back to Joe. We'll get off the show here shortly. But Joe, I see you're working the whole time we were talking there, so you're making use of the time. What project are you working on now?
I was watching you create, man. It's awesome.
I know he's distracting me. I'm watching him. I'm like, oh.
I don't know how well we can focus on this guy.
Love it.
Those are awesome.
These are the dabbers, so these are pretty much ready to go. I'll be taking the tape off of these shortly. We'll throw one of these in with the jar. So you get a jar for the dabbers, and we're also going to throw in this mystery box filled up with swag, pins, necklaces,
Love it.
All sorts of stuff for our lucky winner.
Well, there you go, guys. We are doing a holidays giveaways in conjunction with, I think I've created a Monstah. Joe is throwing in a jar, a mystery box, and a dabber. So if you guys want to get involved with this giveaway, all you have to do is there is an event on Facebook and on Instagram. You guys just got to go find it. It's really easy to find if you can find any of us here on In the Weeds, and just tag 3 friends. Go like Joe's pages, and we'll do a drawing on December 18th. Joe, if you can, send me a couple pictures of the stuff so we can get into that so that everybody knows what's going on, and then go support Joe. Now, Joe, again, you know, being a medical patient, you know, all these things, how do you feel about where we are currently?
I love seeing it go this way. I mean, I've been advocating for this for pretty much since I was 18 years old. You know, I'm 25, 30 years now, which is kind of scary to think about. But I mean, I was in there from the crappy Mexican bags that you got more seed than actual flour that was probably doing to actually, you know, watching and seeing it, the development of the medical discoveries, and you know, people like, oh my God, it's actually legal in California, like that's incredible. And then, you know, the shock and awe of them busting all the compassion centers. You know, where we're at now, it's just like we've been saying through the whole show, it's all about education. It's all about getting rid of that stigma, getting rid of what we've based our laws on some ignorant, racist, Harry Enslinger dude back in, you know, it's just, that was always my go-to. My theme when I was younger was always, I never said legalize it. I always said re-legalize it, because it was already legal once. We needed to re-legalize it. I really don't think of it as a drug, something that just grows in the ground. It's a plant. You know, we don't really alter it. We just pick it and use it. You know, and all these other drugs, cocaine, you can't just pick cocaine from a plant and start snorting it. You know, grab a poppy and all of a sudden you're a junkie. You know, it's something that, and there's so many different things in this plant. Just like I was talking about, the heat signature, the smell. Whoever put this here meant this for us to find it and utilize it in all its form, medicinal, manufacturing, fibers. It's an amazing plant, and I'm so happy to finally see people put the money into research.
Well, I'm just glad to see the world come around on the media side of things. Like we were talking earlier, and brushed on it a lot. In the last 3 years, you know, with technology, with the access to information, we're seeing that, you know, we're realizing that the media is at fault for a lot of fucked up things, whether it's wars, whether it's this drug war, whether it's, you know, all these things that we relied all of our information to is media. And then now we see with, you know, the recent riots of the last year or two, the COVID issues, the election issues, and we're really starting to see, I think the media's exposed itself a lot. You know what I mean? That's why I think a lot of these shows like ours are getting more attention than a Fox News, right? Because Fox News, you know, you're going to get one side. Us, we never know where we're going to get. We're trying to be non-biased.
Never know where we're going to go.
Well, I mean, Tim, we talk about it a lot too. I mean, just with news articles. I mean, we read news articles that will talk about the same thing, have two completely different outlooks and significances to it. So it's very hard for a person nowadays to educate themselves even still, because, you know, sometimes some of these articles we read the first time aren't 100% correct, and you have to read another article. You have to read another article. Then when you get 5 articles deep, you realize that the first 3 articles of stuff that you knew was all bullshit, right? You know, so that's like Joe was saying, the beauty of technology and the way this is going. But, you know, the thing is, we have to be open-minded. You know what I mean? People are open-minded in every other aspect of their lives except for around cannabis. Like what? I mean, we've been open-minded about heroin and opioids but we not open-minded about cannabis. We have doctors and fucking law officials running around with Narcan on them everywhere. Like, that's when you know there's a problem. When it's acceptable for our officers to have to carry Narcan on them, or nurses or anybody in the health professional field to help combat an opioid issue, there's a problem here. You know what I mean? We shouldn't be focusing
How
our
about the
time on.
police chiefs that refuse to allow their officers to carry Narcan?
Right, and then I mean, that's even ridiculous on the flip note, because I mean, obviously it's, you know, you look at it both ways. It's ridiculous that we have to have these guys do it, but it's ridiculous that they don't, because it's, you know, how many lives are we losing a day to opioids? You know what I mean? As the last I knew, it was the #1 killer in America. I mean, I don't know if COVID's even close to what opioids do right now, which is, again, the wrong conversation we need to be having. But you know, this opioid thing is something we need to look at. Cannabis has a huge effect to it. We're seeing people really do wonders with it, especially with PTSD, our veterans, stuff like that. Like you guys said, the way the America's doing it is completely fucked up and wrong. We need to, yeah, legalizing is not the answer, right? We want to get it rescheduled. We want to get it rolled back. We want to get it so we can use it as an agricultural product, and it shouldn't be no different than corn. It should be no different than anything that we grow in a field anywhere else. It should just be run through, be an agricultural product. We pay our taxes on it. We can sell it at our farm stand down the street, and we don't need to get arrested for doing it, right?
I love that.
And plus, you know, for me, it's even like, you know, why am I allowed to grow 1,000 square feet of cannabis, but the guy next to me, my neighbor who has, you know, 50 acres and he's growing 10 acres is going to get raided? You know what I mean? That to me is even another fucked up.
It's either illegal or it's not legal, you know, with all these regulations of saying you could do this or you could do that. But America's always been, whether it's on a global scale or in our country, they've always, you know, went after things with full force, shock and awe, you know, extreme pressure, you know, like Tim was saying earlier, you know, educate people, give people the option to make their own decisions. You know, we've seen it in different models. And you look at Europeans, you know, they've been doing it for 20 years. Like Canada, they're so ahead of us with this stuff. Like you're saying with the psilocybin, they're so done with marijuana. They're like, come on, this was, you know, we would be more ahead if the United States didn't pressure Canada to not legalize it for so long. We held them back. But
Canada, government-wise too, not even statewide or county-wide, it's government. The government is supportive of it. They're the ones driving it. They're the ones that are really the oversight of everything, which is great. You know what I mean? Not that I want to see that in our country, but our medical field, I'd love to see some oversight there. You know what I mean? I'd love to see some basic framework that will allow, you know, things to go crazy. You know, what sucks for me is the fact that I can only grow 2 plants in my house. The guy in the state next to me can grow 12, but the guy who can go get a license or whatnot can go grow however many he wants. You know what I mean?
I live in Rhode Island, and I can literally walk to Fall River, which is Massachusetts. So I have to have a license, and I have to pay taxes for each plant. Even though it's for sick people, I still have to buy a tag for every plant I have. You know, pay those taxes every year, stay within my numbers, lock it up, follow all the route where I could walk to my friend's house in Fall River and he could just have a field in his backyard. It's ridiculous, you know, it's a fake line that I walk over, and it's insane to me.
Well, that's what I'm worried about with the statewide legalizations. That states are just going to go do their complete own thing. Now, when we talk about patients and rights and people's rights, now we have to move to a different state. Like, that just kills me. You know what I mean? And then with insurances and stuff like that, that's where we need to get this going. You know, we saw New Jersey put a foot down, claiming that their insurance companies have to pay for medical cannabis, which is huge. Will it happen? Who knows? But
you got federal, you know, medical companies. I don't think you can force them to pay something that's federally illegal. I think we got to get a federal bill passed before we see that.
No, but that's what's going to happen. You know, we're waiting for the last 3 years, and we're seeing all these markets get ready for federal legalization. They're waiting for the federal thing. They're waiting for the federal thing. The Trump administration has been talking about it before they were even in office, right? They're going to legalize. They're going to legalize. They're going to legalize, and then 4 years later, here we are. You know, it's like what Tim was saying. We keep coming up with these excuses to drag our feet. Oh, we need another test. Oh, we need another this. Oh shit, you did that test. Oh, well, you didn't do this test. You know what I mean? We saw it with the driving situations in every state, right? Especially with underage driving and driving under the influence. Like, how do you tell if a cannabis consumer is driving under the influence, right? Like, you know, we were talking about, you know, oh, you know, the burn smell of the car will give me legality to search your cars. You know, now we're taking that away. You know, we're actually giving a lot of patients rights, but we need to get this done on the federal level, which is hopefully will get done soon. But we see a lot of states coming up. Pennsylvania is a state that's in our conversations a lot lately after New Jersey had legalized. Now they are having the applications for hemp is open in Pennsylvania. So hopefully we'll see Pennsylvania come on board really quick now that they're actually giving applications for hemp. So we'll see that soon. But guys, that's about it for the show. Joe, I just want to give you a quick sign out. Let everybody know where they can find you. Check out your awesome pieces again, and reach out to you with any custom orders.
Yeah, you can just hook me up pretty much on any social media. Just look up, I think I've created a Monstah, or even just put it in your Google. You'll find me either through my Instagram, Facebook, or you can get to my website, which is pretty much just my Etsy store.
Awesome. So guys, again, check out the giveaway we're doing.
Thank you.
Joe's awesome. He's a force. He's at every event I think I've ever been to in Mass. I don't think there's ever been an event I haven't seen Joe at yet.
To get back to him, I really miss it. I miss that so much.
Yes. I mean, that's one thing I think everybody in this world misses is just the camaraderie of having more than 3 people in their life at one time.
God,
and be able to hug somebody. Just be able to hug somebody is all I want to do.
I fantasize about the events and parties I want to throw, like as soon as we get back. We'll throw a party for that. We'll throw a party. It's Tuesday. Let's throw a Tuesday party when we can. I can't wait. I just can't.
The world's going to go nuts. The world's going to go nuts. Well, anyways, 2020 is almost over, guys. So hopefully 2021 will bring us some new cheer, some new life. Hopefully this Corona thing we can figure out without any more deaths or any more tragedies involved. Now we are doing the giveaway, guys. So we have a jar, gift box, and a dabber. So you can find that online as well. We have a little event page going. So just make sure you go tag 3 people out there. Next week, we have Chris and Andy Martin coming on. They just released a documentary about their story and struggles with law enforcement and going to prison and trying to keep their family together. I watched the documentary the other night. If you guys have time to watch it, it's an hour-long documentary. It is on our In the Weeds Facebook page and our group pages. Well, I'll be reposting that again. Please take a minute to watch it because he talks his stories just like everybody else's stories. Just somebody trying to do something, growing up, getting caught, getting busted. And once you're in that system, it's very hard to get out of the system. Chris has done some amazing things, and now he's back. He's got a bunch of great companies. He's doing awesome stuff. So I'm really excited to talk to him. Like I said, right before the New Year's special, we have OG Eddie Lepp coming on. If you guys don't know who Eddie Lepp is, look up his story. Another amazing story. He helped write the propositions in California. He was jailed, prison for 8 years now for growing and providing plants for patients, and only strictly patients. So another great, interesting story. Unfortunately, his health isn't that great. So hopefully we'll have him on. If not, we'll have his wife on as well to talk about their fight. It's not been easy for them. As you guys know, a few years ago, he got out of prison. It was a big deal. One of the OGs, he has a strain named after him. He's done some amazing things for this community of ours for us to be here. So we can't wait to have him on. And then we start the new year. So we have a bunch of shows lined up, guys. We have a bunch of great giveaways. You can get seeds. We have the Addicted Animals book series also for a giveaway. We have the Bud Grower Grow Tents also for a giveaway. We want to give them a big shout out, who are now sponsors of our show. We'll be working with them a lot on different arrangements and deals and discounts you guys can get. A lot of great things, and a big shout out to the Green Nurse group. So next week, guys, will be another fun one. Hopefully we'll get all of our little upgrades done by next week. We're trying. We got all sorts of new things coming for you guys, so don't go anywhere. Joe, again, thank you for taking the time, spending with us. Hopefully you got something done today. And again, guys, happy holidays. Find all of our giveaways, and we'll see you next week. That's all I got.
Next week, guys. Joe, next week. Have a good evening.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a great week.